What's up, guys? So this is going to be a hand trap tier list for YCS Dortmund. To start off with Moonlit Chill, we're going to talk about the kind of all of these kind of one-for-one trading hand traps first. So this is the Moonlit Chill, the Vela. I've actually put Saravis here too, and all of these cards I would say are just not really worth it. And in fact, I'd probably put DD Crow here as well. The problem with all of these cards is that the one-for-one trades just don't win enough games right now. And so if you try and one-for-one trade with these cards, you maybe hurt your opponent a bit, but then they just win after. It's like, think about it. You Moonlit Chill the Yama, for example, and then they've still got another card engraved that can pop off or potentially extend in hand and things like that. Same with Vela, and then also with Talents and Thrust running around, I just wouldn't want to play a lot of these cards. Now, Saravis, I can see why people play it, but in my opinion, just play Book of Moon. It's very rare where you can't just, in every situation where Saravis would help you, 9 out of 10 of them, just having a Book of Moon or Eclipse that using your monster would help you, but then those cards can be used elsewhere as well. That's my problem with Saravis, unless you're playing like specifically a ritual deck, but then I don't know why you're playing a ritual deck, they're crap. So yeah, Bell actually I do think is quite good though. The reason being is because Bell has the advantage that some degenerate FTK stuff, it just stops, which is really nice. So the biggest one is obviously things like Branded, which I do think is actually quite a good deck. The ability to just have an answer to that is always going to be really, really useful. So I think Bell is a bit better than those other ones. Lancey is bad. It's very specific. If you're playing like against D-Link, it will probably beat them, for example, or something like that. Or against Flunder, it's okay. The thing about the Lancia into the Flunder matchup is that when you Lancia Flunder, you don't actually stop their turn. All you do is stop their recursion, which is good. But if you can't immediately capitalize, it won't do anything. And so what's the point of using that? You might as well just crack their board and then use your engine to stop their engine, instead of relying on this to stop their engine and relying on your engine to break their board. So yeah, and then in every matchup where Lancia is good, Chaos Hunter is worse, basically. Any matchup where Chaos Hunter could be good, Lancia is better. I don't want to let them summon before I stop them, and I don't want to do it in the main phase, for example. So Lancia is just better than Chaos Hunter in every situation for the most part right now. And the only matchup where it might have been really good, which is probably Flunder. Unless you're playing Sprite, there's no way you're getting it out. So yeah, it's a bit of a shame. Ghost Ogre is actually bad as well. I think the problem with Ghost Ogre right now is that there's a lot of decks right now that that if you destroy, you either don't do anything to them or they punish you for it. So you don't want to destroy an Unchained. Rescue Ace, if you Ghost Ogre any of their cards, they probably don't care. Pearly, if you try and Ghost Ogre them, anything they on their board, they're just going to happy it, and so that makes Ghost Ogre a lot weaker than all the other hand traps. I would say right now, definitely not a good one to play. Droll, I think, is absolutely amazing. I think Droll should be in every single person's side deck. Droll is so unfair. Look, it's one of the most frustrating things ever when you're playing. Sometimes your opponent's got a board and then they have Droll as well, or even when you go first and it's like you open like loads of engine and then they Droll you and it just kills your whole engine. This card is so unfair. I don't think it should be in anyone's main deck, but I do think it should be in everyone's side deck, because there are a lot of decks that if you don't draw them, you will just lose. And especially in a format where you have things like Talents and Tactics and Thrust, this answers triple. I don't know, I feel like I'm getting the name wrong. The Tactics card that searches any spell or any trap, it stops that as well, which is actually really important. I think that's really, really valid. So yeah, I like Droll. Imperm is another one. I think Imperm's really, really good. I think just because it has the versatility to always be good. Like, actually, what I'll tell you is it's right at the top of this, because the thing about Imperm is that it's nice because it doesn't play into the Tactics cards, but then also when you're going second, you can hold it and use it, for example, an Unchained against the Caesar and just like out two negates with one card, which is really nice. So I really do like Imperm, and then the column thing does come up sometimes in back row matchups. It's a really, really good card. Definitely one that I think you almost certainly should be main decking it, but I'll move it down because I wouldn't say it's a game-winning card. It's definitely a card that plus other stuff is what wins you games. Cherries is good, but the problem with Cherries is it's just too specific. Not most decks don't have the room for it, and then even if you have the room for it, not every deck loses to getting this stuff. Like if for example you look at the spread of top decks in the format, none of them hard lose to losing one extra deck. Even Pearly, for example, taking all the Noirs does not guarantee you the win against Pearly, because they have other ways to beat you. And so that's why I don't really like Cherries right now. I think it's just not worth it. If you're playing Flunder or something, then maybe, and just about maybe if you're playing Rescue Ace, but other than that, I wouldn't replay that card. Shifter is actually going to be another one where if you can play, because a lot of the top decks can play Shifter, so Unchained can play Shifter, Rescue Ace can play Shifter, Flunder can play Shifter, and because all of these are very good decks at the top that can play it, if you can play Shifter, play it. This is a card that will win. That's what I like about Shifter. Like in the matchup, this is another one that I would say for a lot of decks you're going to probably side it, but it's a card that if it does resolve, it just wins. It turns off cards like Draw as well, which is absolutely amazing. And like when you're playing Flunder, that was what was great about Cash. Sometimes you change shift in Cash and now your opponent can't even draw you. This card is really, really good for that reason. So I definitely think it's going to be a very good card in Dortmund. And obviously we're coming off the back of Casteria being banned, which means a lot of graveyard decks come into the format. Well, having a card like Shifter to answer all of them is going to be great. Contact C is actually a lot better than it seems right now, and I think it's because specifically in the Chimera matchup, Chimera and branded matchups, this card does a lot. It's also okay against Pearly, unless some Pearly players now do play IP and things like Nazali and all of that to like deal with cards like this. But what's really nice about Contact C in the Chimera matchup is obviously when they try and summon something, you summon this to their board, and if you don't have anything on your board on turn 1, they can't actually make any fusions, obviously, because they're the one that set the flying beast or whatever one that needs to use like a fiend and a beast and something else. This is an insect. They can't make Guardian Chimera, or they can make Guardian Chimera, but it's not going to do anything because you don't have any cards on your side of the board. And so that's what I really like about Contact C. Now, it's not good enough that I would say main decking it, but if you have a bad Chimera matchup, I would say it's worth playing. Like it has got a bit of potential, and it's nice because it doesn't put a card on your side of the board. Cards that put stuff on your side of the board, which is what we're going to talk about next, are actually really bad right now. And so that's actually why I'm actually going to say Nibiru for me is really low, like right at the bottom here, and I think Phantasmate is right at the bottom here. The problem is, and Token Collector is bad, I guess, and Magnamut is probably here as well. So this is the problem. Right now we're in a format where Thrust and Talents are roaming around, and when they resolve, you just hard lose. A lot of decks, you nib. A lot of the times I was finding on DB is like I nib my opponent, and then they thrust and look at my hand, and I lose. And it's just like, oh my god, why did I nib? I wish I didn't nib you. And Phantasma is even worse because nib at least has the advantage where you can use it as a defensive card. Sometimes you create a board, and then like they have to play through it, and then you nib them as well. Yeah, that's actually quite good. But Phantasma is worse because all it does is draw a card sometimes. Like it just draws you an extra card and puts like a pretty big body on the board that they can't target. But then again, if they have Talents or Thrust, it doesn't matter. I just think these cards are baits. Like I think Nib is okay in the side deck, but I've actually just removed it now. I don't think it's worth it for the most part. I think Phantasma is a trap card. I think don't play Phantasma. I don't think it's good. While Thrust and Talents are so popular. Druiswim, on the other hand, I think is very, very good because this dodges the problem that, and Magnamut, sorry, was the same because Magnamut is not as good as Druiswim. So Druiswim is nice, obviously, because you can use it in the end phase. Now Magnamut you can use it in the end phase, but Druiswim also sends the Unchained card, and non-destructive removal is in general useful, not just against Unchained right now. Magnamut, if you banish, especially in the Unchained matchup, if you banish Yama, you've taken the only Dark out of the grave, your Druiswim probably won't resolve, and then on top of that you don't have the send, which makes it not as good, unfortunately. But it's still okay, but just I don't think it's worth playing. Well, I think if you're going to play 3 of this and 1 of that, Marionette Might shouldn't really be in this list, but you only play this if you really need it. Like basically, if you've already got the mind controls and the change cards and stuff, then and the econs, then play this, and you really need an extra. But I don't think you should be playing this card. Ash Blossom is right at the top. I think Ash Blossom is amazing because the thing is, Ash Blossom flat out wins quite a few matchups. There are a lot of decks, the Rescue Ace, the Unchained, Branded, and the Fusion decks, where if you Ash them, they just pass on an empty board. It's crazy, which is really, really good. And then against every other deck, it just is kind of good. Like it really hurts them, it really stuns them, which is nice. So I really do like Ash. I think obviously this should be in the main deck. It's always going to be a really good card. Now in the context of a tournament, because obviously we're talking about YCS Dortmund, I do think Dogwood is actually always going to be high as well, and this is just because of time rules. Yes, time is extended, but people do play slow, especially in the later rounds. Even if people aren't slow playing, people just sometimes don't know their decks, and because of that, having a card like this that just lets you win in game 3 sometimes is going to be useful. I do think if your deck, this is the addendum to this, is if your deck doesn't already have a native time condition, but if your deck doesn't, I definitely think you should be playing this because it will steal some game 3s for you. Phantasmate, don't play this card, it's bad. Skullmeister is very weak. That's the biggest problem with Skullmeister. It's just so weak that I can't see a world where I really want to play this card. Like it hits Unchained a tiny bit. People were talking about it against Unchained at first, but it's like it hits Unchained a tiny bit, but you've negged a card and you haven't really hurt them that much. If Unchained is like your super feared matchup, even then I probably wouldn't play it because of Talents and Thrust. So yeah, don't play it. And no material is also bad. So yeah guys, that's my hand trap list for Dortmund. I do think it's going to be a really interesting event, so yeah, it'll be interesting to see what hand traps people end up playing. But yeah, I'll talk to you guys soon. Peace.